Alright, so this is going to be the ultimate Bloodmage witch build. Pretty much this will be the only build guide you'll need to have one of the best blood mages made how it's supposed to play. Getting started, Bloodmage is very strong and is based off of critical hit, and this will be a guide to tell you how to level from the beginning all the way to endgame. And as you can see, currently I'm level 69 and I'm doing tier 1 maps. Now, when you first start the game, one of the stronger spells that you'll want to go with would be Flame Wall. As soon as you get to the point in the story, which is at the Fraythorn, you'll get additional spirit as well as a spirit gem to use. What will be your first major ability, which is Raging Spirits. Now this utilizes spirits, and because this is a guide from beginning to end, I will slowly get more and more complex. However, whenever you get Raging Spirits, what you'll want to do is socket it onto your bar, and once you socket it onto your bar, you want to make sure, based off of whatever weapon that you are using, it is turned on. So for me, as you can see in this example, right now I have Grim's Feast socketed for my weapon 2, and when I go over, it is also socketed as to on my weapon 1. So that means no matter if I'm using my abilities or my spells from weapon 1 or weapon 2, Grim Feast will be on. That goes the same with stuff like your minions. So if you have minions turned on your weapon 2, but they are not turned on your weapon 1 because you don't have enough spirit, then whenever you are utilizing that weapon, you will or will not be able to have skeletal mages spawn on the map. So if you see sometimes your skeletal mages just disappear out of nowhere, that's probably the reason why. Second, as you go through, some of the items that you want to pick up will be a wand for this specific type of build, as well as a focus. Now, as you start and prior to you getting to your first Ascendancy, you'll want to get scepters, and the reason why you want scepters is because they have additional spirit that you could use, especially in the early game, for additional minions, and they are very, very strong in early game. Now, the reason why I led to a Blood Mage build instead of an Infernalist build is because at times you could see minions attacking walls or surfaces that aren't actually the monster, and I prefer to have the control to attack the monster instead of attacking something like a bone wall or a glacial wall. So I just started focusing on Blood Mage. Now once you reach the point where you get your first Ascendancy, you will unlock 2 skills, and you have to unlock Sanguimancy. Now a lot of people are saying don't unlock Sanguimancy. However, they're not understanding how strong Sanguimancy actually is. And by the time you actually want to complete the Trial of Secumus for the first time, you should want to have done a lot of Act 2, to where at that point you should have 1 or 2 Exalted Orbs to be able to purchase some unique items. Now, some of the items that I utilize to help me push past the early game, and the reason why I went for unique items in the early game prior to getting gold items in the early game, is because the bonus effect of unique items, if you were to look at something like this volatile wand, will give you something like 98% increased spell damage, while no other wand that is gold at this level will give you something like this. And then the Sanguine Bone Wand is another example, and this is perfect to be able to utilize with the bone build that you will start to go into. Now by the time you reach this point, you'll want to have Bonestorm unlocked, you'll have a few of your Frost Mages unlocked, and then you'll have Ray Zombie that will help you through a lot of the game. Now this is just getting you to the point to where you want to build Bonestorm, Essence Drain, and Contagion all the way up until you can unlock Hexblast. Now Hexblast is probably going to be one of your strongest skills that you utilize for clearing ads as a chaos build. Another item that you'll want to utilize is Para's Embrace Cloaked Mail. Now this reduces the mana cost of skills, which also reduces the life cost whenever you utilize a skill. And what that does is continue to keep you alive longer while having that Sanguimancy buff active. If you could, some other notables that you'll want would be the Solar Amulet that gives you more spirit, as well as the Woven Focus that increases spell damage per 10 spirit. So this is why you want to build spirit. Now, each of these should cost about 1 or 2 Exalted Orbs each as you build up. So as you continue in the game, just start buying these one by one. Now, some other good notables, just so you can see, would be this ring that will allow you to get more curses, because as you see, you'll want to lay into the curse build. Now, as you continue, one of the biggest upgrades to your build that you will get would be the Blasphemy spell. And how you'll want to kit out your Blasphemy spell is you'll want to get 2 of them. One of your Blasphemies will be for chaos, while the other will be specifically for physical damage. And the physical damage one is the Armor Blasphemy. Now, initially it will be the Spare and Enfeeble, and Enfeeble will give you basically damage reduction. So as you continue in the game, you always have damage reduction. And as you continue to grow powerful in your build, you'll eventually want to get Temporal Chains. And what Temporal Chains do will slow the enemies around you, while Blasphemy will always put a curse on each of the enemies around you. Now, what you want to couple Blasphemy with is Hexblast, because every time you just run up to anybody, you're just blasting them with Hexblast continually, and it just continues to create explosions throughout the game, and it just trivializes almost all of the adds as you get to the boss. Now, as you start your passives, what you'll want to do is lean towards the spell damage pathway and just continue up. And you'll want your tree to look similar to this. Now, this is with the caveat in me teaching you how to split into a chaos build as well as a bone build. Now, the chaos build will be for area of effect and for all of the adds and mobs, while the bone build will be specifically for bossing. And as you build, and what you'll want to do to separate your builds is when you go to your weapons, you'll notice at the top, and I am on console, that one above the weapon would be my first weapon slot, while the 2 lines, which indicates 2 above the weapon, is my second weapon slot. So when I build my passives, I go into something like Bonestorm, and because my second weapon is specifically for physical spell damage, while my first weapon is specifically for chaos spell damage, the way I want to slot my Bonestorm is that I will go to skill options, and because Bonestorm is a second weapon set to use, I will put it on my second weapon slot, while for all my chaos damage weapons, I will put it on my first. Now this will split my damage, and you can see how it splits your damage, because if I put it to the second weapon slot, it drops it all the way down to 3,700 damage. Now you'll see that this is one of the biggest roadblocks for almost all builds in Path of Exiles 2. So the way you beat that is, as you build this out, go specifically for spell damage that will be for both of your spells. And when you want to trail off for something like additional physical damage and bleed, because you want to have a bleed build to inflict additional physical damage, what you'll do is, as you go to the weapon, you hold on PlayStation X and you just pick which weapon you want. So you want to allocate this one to weapon set 1 if it was for chaos, but weapon set 2 if it was for physical. And because this is my physical build, you'll see this green because it's going to all of my weapon set 2 abilities. And then this other line will be from my weapon set 1 abilities. Now, explaining why I went for some of these abilities. So this build, you'll want to go for crit chance as well as raw spell damage, and I'll explain why you do not want to go for crit damage a little bit later. So along with that, because this is going to be a curses build, you want to go for curses. You also want to have hinder on your curses, which will continually slow down the monsters around you. So any monster that just rushes you will automatically be slowed. Their attacks will be slowed. And then you want to push to continue to slow them, as well as get increased damage on those hits. Now, in other areas, I'm going for cast speed, because for the bleed build, while using Bonestorm, it is a channeling build, so you need to channel a lot of those effects. And I'm also going for bleed damage. So as I continue, I'm just going for more cast speed as well as more critical hit chance. So there's some areas where I want more critical hit chance. As I go further, I just look for additional areas like additional withered, which I could take off that additional 30 spirit later on in the game. Now, because you have focus, what you also want to build into is additional energy shield, and you will get additional 40% energy shield while you have a equipped focus. So there's multiple nodes that give that 40%, and as you play the Bloodmage, you will get an additional 75 plus an additional 25% while on full energy shield. Now there's another node over here that will also give you increased energy shield as well as increased damage per curse that's on you. Now this is probably going to be more effective in the later portions of the game. However, it's very strong as you get more and more damage increases. Going into the skills to utilize as a whole, when you get towards endgame, you'll want to have Soul Offering, and the reason why you want Soul Offering is because you want more spell damage, and I will show you here in a second what that additional spell damage looks like. I slotted each of these in priority from left to right, so you know exactly which ones you want for each of these as you build out your character. Now, Soul Offering, I won't go over that too much. Basically, you'll want to slot in these support gems. Withering Presence would be good, but it's only utilized for one, so I don't really have any support gems for Withering Presence just yet. Contagion, you'll want to put 40% more skill direction. You also want Hinder on Contagion, so this will continually slow each of the monsters. And then you'll want Chaotic Freeze, and Chaotic Freeze is a great debuff because basically it almost insta freezes them if you throw on a Contagion prior to throwing on Hexblast. Bonestorm, what you'll want is Arcane Tempo because you'll want the additional cast speed. Brutality, because this will give you 35% more physical damage. Physical Mastery, it'll give you a +1 to your physical skills. And then you'll want Splinter for now, because this will add to the stun on the boss, and because this is tied to your physical damage, you will stun the boss a lot quicker than you would if you do not have that. For Essence Drain, you'll want Encumbrance, because this will continue to slow the monsters around you and give you that hinder effect. Frost Nexus, and then you'll want Intense Agony. Skeletal Warriors, you really don't want to slot that in until you're back into Act 3 Cruel, and then you go back to Azek Bog and get your additional 30 spirit points. Hexblast, you don't really worry about the cast speed, so you go for Considered Casting, Chaos Mastery, of course, and then you'll want Inspiration because it is a very costly skill and you will run out of mana a lot with this. So you can either do a swap with Bonestorm whenever you're going against bosses. However, I just don't feel the need to swap, and you could just use a few mana potions when bossing. Blasphemy we went over. However, for the Chaos build, you'll want to have additional Chaos damage, and for the physical build, you'll want Ritualistic Curse. Now, It's not necessarily needed, but I believe this will increase the area to where it would reach the boss. Now, the reason why I'm going for crit chance is because we have these arms, and when you're at endgame, I highly recommend as a blood mage that you get these, because you get a straight up damage bonus, which is 300%. And because you're building out your focus and your survivability in other areas, just having a flat out damage bonus while you just have a high crit chance is really crazy, especially because as you continue, what you'll want to get as your second ascendancy would be 10% spell damage leached as life. Not only is it good for survivability, but it is very, very strong as a defensive buff as well. And then and for my future, going to the third ascendancy, I will be getting grasping runes, because this is just an automatic 25% damage resistance buff, because you're always casting spells which will get you back that 25% before you lose it in 4 seconds. And then after that, and because you have those arms on, I personally am going to go for more bleed effect to just have more damage over time. But if you want to be more tanky, you could go for Crimson Power, because you get additional energy shield from equipped body armor. For your equipment, I just went into by endgame heavy into all of my resistances. Yes, I could use a little bit more just to max some of them out, but where you are weak is in your armor. So what you'll want to do is eventually find a poison charm as well as a bleeding charm, because these two charms will even out your weakness as a blood mage on almost all content. In addition, I just go for a ring that has an additional skill slot so that I could utilize 2 blasphemy spells. You can do that twice. Now, in addition to that additional skill slot, I go for chaos damage as well as increased cast speed and maximum life. And then I go for elemental resistances. Because you are a spell mage, attacks technically do not account to your spells. However, for some reason, when I take this ring off, it seems as if it does affect my spells. So I have kept this on for now, but I may slot this out later. For your amulets, I just went for a high spirit amulet and lucked out very early on in the game, because a lot of people were selling these for cheap for 1 or 2 exalted orbs. And then for my focus, I just went for similar focuses, 1 for chaos and then 1 for spell and physical damage. For my boots, I went for movement speed, life, mana. For my belt, I could do a better belt, but I just went for mana and then all of the resistances to just make up for my arms. Now, if you cannot afford these arms, I would just go back into your character and slot in a lot of skill damage. Now, as for going forward with the character, I have a lot of cast speed that I want to continue to build out. I also have a lot of crit chance that I want to continue to build out. As far as the physical build, I want to get additional projectiles, because that is an additional chance to double the damage. And the reason why I kitted out Soul Offering the way I did and have 2 skeletal mages is, as you see, my Bonestorm is 9600 while my Hexblast is 8500. Now, let me cast Soul Offering, and when you look at it again, it's 14 and then 12. Now, in addition to that, because you're gonna have debuffs on all of the enemies, keep in mind your debuffs will be at a discounted rate. So even though this says 34% debuff, because you have Blasphemy, it will be half, but that is still a 17% debuff, which is a 17% increase to damage that is not being shown on this Bonestorm. As well as even if you are using Hexblast, because you have Withering Presence on, you will have a continuing debuff, which will continually have 5% of a damage increase with all of your chaos spells as you continually progress throughout the map for monsters that even stay alive. How you want to kit out your reserves is for your chaos build, you'll want Grim Feast because it is a very powerful buff that basically gives you double shields consistently on kill and on deaths on your skeleton warriors. You'll also want Blasphemy. Now Blasphemy, take it as far as you can with your curses. It is 60 spirit points per curse, and then you'll want Withering Presence just to have that additional hinder effect on all the monsters you go by. And that's just the additional debuff for your Hexblast. Now for your second weapon set, which is going to be for your physical build, you'll want your physical Blasphemy, then you'll want Grim Feast on because it's still just as strong, and then you'll want 2 skeletal warriors so that you can utilize them for bosses whenever you sacrifice them for boss damage. Now with this build, I pretty much only use 1 bar and I have no need to use my second bar, and I just spam Hexblast against monsters and then spam Bonestorm against bosses. Now whenever I go against monsters that are a little bit tougher in the areas, I throw on a Contagion and then it will freeze them, and then just go back to Hexblast and every so often do Essence Drain. But this is pretty much the build. Now the reason why I don't use Profane Ritual on console, it is very inconsistent on where they throw the Profane Ritual, so it basically is a waste of a skill whenever it's not aiming to the right direction. Now if you found this video helpful, leave a thumbs up, like, subscribe, and if you want me to do a build on a new character as I get this one leveled up to 100 and solidify this build, leave that character down below, and I'll see you next time.